So now it's recording. Okay.
Yep.
One year they had it at St. Joe's, and that was...
Huh? Oh, I thought you said your fetus is killing you.
Oh.
Walk past?
Yeah, that's...
The leader
That's for a lot of... I don't think it looks like that live. Yeah, you have to be like far away. And I don't think... I think that's just the preview for it.
You guys, I can't take phone calls.
That's what you said.
not even on music cameras they used to, because that's how I was. That changed. They didn't get convicted. Don't do it again.
You good? I'm gonna check that.
Yeah, because that's the one I was telling you about. It was at St. Peter City Hall. Yeah, because Sager did it one year too. Where I was at
Is it?
Would you be offended if I told you I just had the urge to kick you in the butt? No? Good.
yeah, I know. As a teacher, they
And of course.
take you like
So is the tape running up here?
signs or stuff you could property.
Oh, you did one too straight. I was going to say that hard drive's going to fill up in like 5 minutes.
You could have a sign on your car, but
You could put up here too, and then to compare down here, we'll begin at 7 p.m. or something. Unless that's usually it's no.
Oh, that's
oh, man. Oh, okay.
What's in here?
Because some of them are retired.
What show is that? Sign in things. It is live chat, but you can't actually participate on the school platform. I don't think I could code this. Somehow sign in.
Those mints are so good, and they just like, no. This is terrible. Wait, the mile? Yeah, it's always too much because people will run it under 4 minutes. That's why. I know, it's
I'm doing fine, and you? Did you have a good spring break? Good. Did you take some time off? Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's great. It's fabulous.
Well, we were lucky we had nice weather, too. Yeah.
I should have told Mama.
Did you have a good, I guess you probably didn't know how to have a break. But I guess you did enjoy it.
Well, my grandson was off, so I got to spend some time with him. We went to the zoo and did some fun things. So, yeah, it was nice. And I went out camping. Yeah, yeah, I've been really lucky.
I've got a footprint.
I don't think it does. When we did the live chat, we had some out on the program.
My youngest had a pocket book. She was great.
We did the live chat last time. We had to work on a computer and use that.
This was back when it never
Just have that like
worked.
shrunk and
My daughter was a freshman.
so if we want to do the live chat, it doesn't show up. Because like you have to sign in.
Come along with me. Give it. I have questions. I'll just. Okay, whenever you give them to us, make sure you tell us who they're from. These are from people out there, right?
On the website, it's not showing
You don't
anyone.
need. I don't need their name. Just like because she's gonna be giving us from Facebook and Twitter. So we're just gonna like patron or Facebook and Twitter basically. So all the ones you hand us, we'll know. Unless you get them from somewhere else.
We're switching places with you, so people just hang out. You go around getting questions. When you leave, aren't you leaving?
Yeah, but I think Caitlin's taking my spot.
Kevin told me that me and Caitlin were going. So I don't know. It's okay
She's
if
not
I don't.
leaving. She's staying.
Okay.
Probably.
I guess you just forgot.
But yeah, I'll tell them and I'll ask them if there's something
I'll
else.
leave if I have to leave.
Yeah, the plan because I just
You know, and actually, you went on to do and then after they gave you a chance. Shane was still Okay.
I have
live.
Well, you know, only week from Easter next week.
It's funny.
That's a new one. You probably get the same thing. Early, it's yeah. It's starting to be more up here.
The camera's not great.
The actual school of water is
Yeah, with the candidates.
Yeah, here they are. They're all here, aren't they? I'm right on the camera.
Thank you. So were you up here with nothing? What do you do for them? Really? I'm excited for you. You're like, oh,
Hey, Steve, how you doing? I'm doing well. Good to see you.
How are you? How you been?
You guys can start taking your seats. We're going to get started here in about a minute or two, so if you guys want to start sitting down, so that'd be fantastic, okay? If you guys have any questions, you guys there are note cards out on the table. If you guys want to write those down, and hand them to Jordan or Morgan out there, and they'll give them to us so we can ask the candidates and all your questions, okay?
Sorry. I can't let you show up. Not me. Oh, then I don't want to go if you're I have to go to the doctor so I could just go before that. But it's only for the time, right? That's fine, because I just got to go to the place to get done and say, you want to do that 15 minutes early and we'll go down Sure you do.
I know what's wrong with you. I think it's like they don't.
Do you want me to make a list instead of you seeing it in person? If you want to see it.
I think the rest of it.
And then you have this person. Come on, up and down. It's actually
Hi, I'm Kate Gentleman,
And I'm Kevin Germany.
and we want to welcome you to the FHNtoday.com Meet the Candidates Night.
The stakes for the Board of Education election this year have never been higher. The district is facing shrinking property values in the district. They're facing tougher standards from the state and national levels, and they're seeing a budget that is tightening up year after year.
Tonight we want to welcome you here in the audience as well as our viewers at home, and you're going to get a more detailed view of the candidates and what their goals are and what their plan is.
So, for the next 2 years, two of you will be on the Board of Education. You guys will be tasked for the next 3 years. I lied, I'm sorry. For the next 3 years, you guys will be on the board, which is a big responsibility, as you guys know. So we're excited to know what you guys' plans are, what you guys' goals are for the district. So without further ado, let's get to 2012 FHNtoday.com, meet the candidates on the road. So we're going to start with some introductions. You guys have 2 minutes to introduce yourselves, kind of talk about your candidates, see what your guys' goals are. We're going to start with you, Mr. Hoditz. Okay?
My name is Marty Hoditz, and I've been a resident of the Francis House School District since 1974. My wife and I have raised 2 children within Francis House District, and they've completed their education from K through 12 within our district. Both of my boys are successful business leaders for companies right now, for major companies in the United States. During this time, my wife became an educator for Francis House School District. She teaches at Cosley Elementary, the Gifted program. And with living out here since 1974, we have seen the changes of Francis House. From a smaller school district that was growing in leaps and bounds to one that we see today, that we have plenty of building capacity for our kids, and we have high-quality teachers throughout our district. Why do I want to be a board member? When I first ran for Board of Education 6 years ago, student learning was my main issue. It is still the same today. Education is a lifelong process. Students' needs are my first priority. All students deserve a high-quality education, whatever their learning ability. The second thing that we really have to worry about, that Mr. Beardman led us to, was the financial responsibility of our district. The taxpayers of Francis House School District, the Board of Education, Central Administration of the district continues to have sound fiscal management, and we budget our students' needs with the taxpayers' needs. With the downturn in the economy in the United States, our governments are now forcing more of the responsibility to the local taxpayer. So with this, it is becoming more important all the time for the district to find new sources of revenue to help us all, to help out the students. Our government mandates laws and programs that we must have. These mandates, by law, are supposed to be funded. But our government is not doing that. Francis Howell District today has been able to finance these mandates, but there will be a time when it comes into question, are we going to meet the mandates? Are we going to provide the education for the majority of students?
All right, Mr. Hoditz, thank you so much. And guys, could you make sure to click on your microphone for us so we can hear the audio at home? We design a very complicated mic system. No big deal with things for any future years. So, Mr. Johnson, you're up next.
Thank you, Kevin. First of all, I want to thank Francis Out North today for hosting this candidate forum, for you and Paige soliciting all these questions tonight. I've been a resident of St. Charles County also since 1987. My wife is a lifetime resident of St. Charles County. We have a son who is a freshman at Francis Howell North, so we have pretty deep roots in the Francis Howell community. One of the questions that we were asked to answer is, why do we think we're qualified as a board member? I think I'm qualified to be a board member based on the 3 years previous experience and the training I've received through the Missouri School Board Association. I'm retired. I have adequate time to devote to the position, whether it be serving on assigned committees, visiting schools, or attending community functions. I believe at a time of financial uncertainty, this board needs stability and experience, plus individuals that can make independent decisions based on good information. I've learned much in my first term, and I've been told by parents, teachers, and patrons that my being on this board makes a difference. I want to help continue the momentum of the past 3 years by being re-elected next Tuesday.
Mr. Johnson, thank you so much. Mr. Sider?
Good evening. I'd like to thank Francis Almore, FHNtoday newspaper too, for putting on this Meet the Candidate Night. Everybody, they did that completely on their own, as I understand, and it's a big challenge, so thank you. My name is Eric Sider. I'm running for the school board because I am passionate about public education. President Kennedy said, as public education goes, so goes our country. I think that's even more true for our community. I'm passionate about student learning and student needs. I want to raise the achievement levels within our district. They're already high, but they can be higher. I know as our school grows and continues to do better, so does our local economy. We'll see property values increase. We'll see people moving into the district because of the quality of our schools. I want to maintain strict fiscal responsibility. As Marty and Steve had mentioned, financial times are uncertain. The state continues to underfund education and not fund the mandates that they require by law. And as you mentioned, Kevin, we're also seeing a shrinking tax base. So I think fiscal responsibility is more important than ever. I also want to support teachers and the staff and the administration so that we can support student learning in the district. I've worked for the Post-Dispatch for 17 years. I'm the Director of Internet Technology and Telecommunication for Lee Enterprises St. Louis. I have 4 kids. 3 kids are out of high school, K-12. 2 are in college, 1 has graduated. I have 1 daughter at Francis L. North. That's a junior. She'll be graduating next year. In the last 17 years, as a manager at the Post-Dispatch, I've managed both union and non-union employees, and I understand how to manage a multi-million-dollar budget, whether it be capital-based or operational-based. I thank you for your time. Look forward to answering your questions.
All right, thank you. Marie Hoft.
Hello, I'm Marie Haupt. Again, thank you for inviting us and giving us the opportunity to share our thoughts and our views. I have been in the district all of my life. I am 6th generation to live in the Francis House School District within a 10-mile radius. With my family, I have known where Francis House come from and where it began and how it actually became a district, because it didn't become a district until around the 1940s. So I have a real good grasp of the history of Francis House. I have been a teacher in the district for 34 years, teaching both elementary and middle school level. So I know what it's like to be into the classroom. I know the decisions that the administration and the board makes, how that might affect students and teachers in the classroom. I have 3 children who have all graduated from Francis House, as well as my parents, myself, my husband. And I'm very proud of my children because they got an excellent education here, and they have gone on to have very successful careers. My main priorities are, of course, the students. I want to see that we can maintain the quality programs that we have, and that we can bring back some of the programs that we lost last year. I also feel it's very important that we keep our class sizes at the state's desirable sizes, and that we have quality teachers. And I have been a member of the FHEA for 33 years, and I am now, since I'm a retired teacher, I am part of the retired NEA. So I am very focused on the teachers, what happens in the classrooms, what goes on with the students. Again, like everyone else has mentioned, fiscal responsibility is extremely important. I have worked on many budget committees over the past 34 years, and I have a good understanding of school district finances and how that works. I've also served on several curriculum committees and other technology committees and other committees throughout the district. So I feel I'm qualified because I have a handle on everything and I've lived it. So thank you.
Fantastic. Okay, so we're going to start some questions now, guys. We have some from the audience and some that we have. And we, by virtue of we rolled the dice. Eric, you are the firm who's going to start us off with our first question. And the first question we have is one that Paige and I would like to ask you guys. And I think one of the bigger issues the board has faced this year was the tax rate back in September, October, that time. So I want to talk, in your term, the sunset provision will expire and the budget's going to continue to see this shrinking and tightening, especially as revenues start to go down and start to dwindle. So I want to ask you how you would handle the budget and keep the district fiscally solvent.
Thank you. This is a very common question I get when I'm going door to door and canvassing, and I think we need to balance the need of the students versus laying off teachers. Neither situation is a good situation. We don't want to have to lay off teachers to cut staff to save money. We don't want our classroom sizes to get larger because it will have a direct impact on students. I spoke very publicly at a board meeting when the tax rate that had been increased was rolled back the next week at a special meeting. And I disagreed with that rollback because I believe the district could use the money in the classroom, as Marie said, to increase and put back in some of the things that we had to cut last year.
All right, thank you for your response, Mr. Snyder. Ms. Hoffman, please.
Well, I agree with a lot of what Eric said. I too was disappointed when they rolled back to, instead of doing the 518, was it? I know it's a very difficult time because our community members are struggling also with jobs and trying to make ends meet. But again, the district needs this money. And a lot of things, we really don't know what's going to happen down the road. And Mr. Supple has been excellent in helping advise us and keeping track of our finances. And I will probably rely on him a lot. But I do believe that I would like to see that tax be permanent. That we ask the voters to...
The sunset provision?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Just want to clarify that, sorry.
Yes. Thank you.
No problem, thank you.
Okay, so Mr. Hodis?
Once when we set the original tax 518, I voted for it, and I voted against reducing it to 513. My reasons for it was the district, we see that we're going to have to cut the decrease in revenue down the road. And if we had the tax rate set at 518, we could have been saving this money to help our reserves to overcome the deficits that we will be seeing in the near future. The deficits that we're seeing is not due to the taxpayer support from Francis Howe. The deficits that we're seeing is due to the lack of funding from the state. And I'm referring to transportation. I'm referring to the foundation formula. If our state would do this, the 20-cent sunset would not be an issue for Francis Howe. But until the state steps up to the plate and do what they are supposed to do, Francis Howe and other districts are going to have the same issue. This is once when we're going to have to ask our public, what type of education do you want Francis Howe to have? They're going to have to tell us, do we want to keep the 20 cents or roll it back and decrease the quality of the education of our students? So it will be up to our state legislatures and mainly our taxpayers.
All right, thank you, Mr. Johnson. I'm going to finish that up there.
Kevin, just clarification, we're talking about the special purpose levy, 20 cents?
Yes, sir.
We're not talking about the tax rate that was set?
Well, we're talking about both and keeping the district fiscally solvent in your plan to maintain facilities and the budget at the same time.
The 20-cent special purpose levy does fall off in the next couple of years, and we discussed this at a work session in December. We're going to need some input from the public to basically tell us as a board what they want to do. Do they want to maintain the current academic level that we have? Or are we going to let that levy expire and then are forced to make additional cutbacks, which would be tough. So as Mr. Hodes pointed out, that's a local tax issue that the patrons are going to have to decide, and the district needs to come out sooner than later so that we can plan if that levy doesn't pass. I think we're probably going to have a bellwether next Tuesday on whether it'll pass or not with the Colleyville Fire District's 27-cent levy. If that passes, that might give us an idea of what kind of opportunity we have. But, I think that's, we're going to have to go back to the patrons, tell them, as Mr. Hodes pointed out, the underfunding from the state, and ask them if they want to continue that levy. As far as the discussion about the tax rate that was initially proposed, which was, and then we voted on, which was $5.13, the board voted to approve the original budgeted amount that was requested by administration, which was $5.13. It was suggested that we roll that up to $5.18 due to some extra construction monies that had come in. And the majority of the board decided in these times, as Marie pointed out, to give that $1 million back to the public. If we need that money next year, we can recoup that. But this year we rolled that $1 million back to the public, and I think it was a good decision.
All right, thank you. Our next question was from a patron in the audience. I think we just got that for us here. So,
how do you see the connection between students' internet access and 21st century learning?
let me start with you. Who's backing things up?
Well, 21st century learning includes technology. It's a small part of it. There's about 4 or 5 different aspects to 21st century learning, and technology does have a piece of that. It's the school district has adopted the NET standards, which are the National Educational Technology Standards, which also kind of falls into that 21st century learning. And I guess, could you repeat the question, because I'm not real sure what you're wanting.
Yes, how do you see the connection between students' internet access and 21st century learning?
Okay, with the 21st century learning, some of the part is research and being adaptable and being able to communicate, and that's part of 21st century learning, and with the internet they can do that. Okay?
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hodes?
The internet is part of the everyday lives today, just like the newspaper and the news on television was part of my days when I was in school. 21st century learning requires all of our students to be able to understand how to access the internet, how to determine what is right on the internet, and what is really a false statement that's been made to it. With 21st learning in our teachers, we'll be able to decipher this information. As we all know, the internet, if it's out there, people believe, but a lot of it's not true. But the 21st century learning goes beyond internet. If you read articles today, the skills for the 21st century are also some of the basic skills that were in my time. And they are going to be part of the Common Core curriculum that we're going to have, and it's being recommended for it. So the internet in itself and the use of it is only one function of 21st century.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hodes. Mr. Johnson, would you like to answer the question, please?
Access to the internet is definitely expanding our schools, giving students capability of going on and, as Marty pointed out, finding information that may be true or may not true. But one of the biggest elements of the 21st sensory learning is learning how to collaborate and work in groups, which I think is going to be one of the keys to our success as a nation in the future. We do have access. It is an integral part, but with that comes responsibilities. And just as you are at home, students have limits on access to the internet. So while we have rolled out this technology and are expanding its use in the district, I think those that use it should know that there is an area of responsibility that is involved in the proper use of this tool. And but it's great, and to the extent that we can expand it and enhance the learning in our schools, it's wonderful.
Mr. Sire?
Excuse me. First of all, I'd like to agree with all of my fellow candidates. I'll speak directly to the internet access piece, which I think is maybe underlying that question. As a member of the Francis South School District Technology Committee, we've discussed this. We've discussed the adoption of the NET standard in the 21st century and core curriculum. But what I hear from students most often is they can't get to all the sites that they want to get to on the internet. I think that the district will be reevaluating that as we go forward, because as we adopt bring your own technology to the classroom, kids are going to have Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, other things available to them on their devices that they bring into the classroom. So I think we need to weigh that ability also with the resources we allow in the classroom.
Fantastic, thank you. Our next question actually comes from a student. She is a junior at Francis South High School. Her name is Smith and Millie, and she asks, how do you plan on supporting gifted education? She wants to start with you, Mr. Hodges.
Since my wife's a gifted teacher here in the district, gifted education at the high school level, we have a little issue with. With the AP classes that we're offering now for all of our students, the gifted program enrollment has decreased over the years, but the enrollment in AP has increased. At no time that I see will we discontinue the gifted program in our high school, but it's going to be decreased in size for it. We took that step last year because we could not afford to have teachers having 1 or 2 students in the classroom for gifted, and other teachers have 25, 30 kids. So the gifted education in high school is a part of our curriculum. It will remain a part until the students decide that we're not going to take it. And yes, there is a lot of drop-in students do it. But the drop-in really cannot support having a teacher in the classroom with fewer than 25 students for the whole day.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Johnson?
I think the challenge in high school with gifted students is providing them a challenging curriculum, one that keeps them busy. The district has made a huge financial investment in Project Lead the Way by bringing it into not only the high schools, but into the elementary schools. We've made a financial commitment in personnel. We've made a financial commitment in hardware and software. And we've started to launch a pilot program in our middle schools to prepare students for science, technology, math, before they get into high school. But I would see continuing to support those programs and encourage as many students as possible to get involved in these courses in high school.
All right, thank you. Mr. Sider?
As a parent of gifted students, I think gifted education is extremely important at all levels. As Mr. Johnson said, we need to keep students engaged. And however we can keep students engaged keeps them in school and keeps them progressing. I also think that we need to make the same resources available to kids who are not gifted and who at the other end of the spectrum. I support all student learning and all the kids in our classroom and would want to see that continue.
All right, thank you. Mrs. Holt?
Well, the gifted program is very near and dear to me. At Sager, I worked with a lot of those gifted students. I think it's really, really important, like my fellow candidates had said, these are people who are going to be the leaders of our world. And we really need to give them all the supplies and all the information they need so that they can continue into their endeavors and expand their brains and really get out there. They need a lot of guidance also. Yes, they're very, very intelligent. And my experience with the gifted is that sometimes they are so gifted and so intelligent, they have a hard time understanding just how things work in society. And they need a lot of guidance. And they need a teacher there with them that can help them guide them through their difficult times. At the middle level, at least at Sager, a lot of those students would go across the parking lot and take classes at the high school. So we would have 6th graders taking algebra or geometry or whatever. And I would really like to see those classes when they're in the middle school count as college credit. Because, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that these children we can't have a 14-year-old to go on to MIT because of the restrictions that we have in our district. And I would really like to see these students be able to expand and do the best of their abilities and keep them engaged and keep them out of trouble, so to speak. Thank you.
All right, thank you. This is another one of our patron questions, and I don't know who comes from, but it comes from the audience. And the question here is, what do you see as the biggest challenge facing the Francis Hall School District, and what would you plan to do about that problem? And we'll start with Mr. Johnson.
The biggest challenge over the next 3 years is finances. Education is one of the few endeavors that I've been involved in when you set your budget months before you even know how many people you're going to have working for you. And even weeks before the legislature even decides how much money is going to be provided for education. So the budget in this district is a working document and changes daily. I would support maintaining our academic level as it currently is. We're making an investment next year. We're hiring extra teachers to keep classroom size down because our population is up. At some point, we're going to have to, as I mentioned earlier, go out to the patrons and ask them, are you happy with the current academic level that your students are seeing in your schools? And if you are, we're probably going to have to ask, especially if that 20 cents is allowed to roll off, extra funding to maintain our academic excellence. The cuts that were made in this current school year were dramatic, and we don't want to have to really go through that again. This district is very fiscally responsible, and will continue to operate it that way. But we do need direction from patrons. The administration has done a great job of doing a lot with less, and we're going to have to continue to do that. But we're going to have to find other resources to support our academic endeavors.
Fantastic. Mr. Sider, a question for you.
As Mr. Hodis and Mr. Johnson said, I believe the biggest issue facing the district is going to be financial. To reiterate what Marty said earlier, the state continues to chop education funding. If you look at the state's education spending over the last 10 years, you see a dramatic decline. In addition to that, we also have our federal government, which is a fairly small piece of our overall budget, but that also continues to decline, or it comes with so much red tape that it's not worthy of trying to get. In 1974, then President Nixon integrated all students into the classroom. And he said, regardless of handicap or ability, we're going to educate every student. And we're going to promise to spend, we're going to fund 40% of that education. Under President Bush, that funding fell to 9%. Under President Obama, it's risen to a mere 11%. So the school district continues to take on mandates from the federal government and from the state government, and they continue to underfund their own mandates. It's looking right now like the Missouri General Assembly is going to underfund the formula by approximately $3 million, and that's going to hurt districts like Francis Howell. As Steve and Mr. Johnson and Mr. Hoden said, we're going to have to ask our patrons and our families in the district, do you want to maintain the level of education you have, or do you want us to have to cut teachers and staff and extracurriculars and all the things that go along with that cost money? It's a question for our patrons and our parents. I hope the district and myself as a board member, if I'm lucky enough to get elected, can help educate the community for what the needs are going forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Mrs. Hope?
Wow, it's hard to follow them. I totally agree with what they said. Finances is going to be our biggest issue. I agree we need to go to the taxpayers and ask them about the 20 cents. Again, I am really proud of the educational programs that we have here. I was real disappointed when some of them were cut last year, and now they're bringing teachers back, so I kind of wonder what was going on there. But I agree that we definitely have to look at that, because I've been reading also that it sounds like the state is gonna be flat again this year as far as the funding to the school districts. And it's an area that we have to constantly keep vigil and look at. And like Mr. Johnson said, it constantly changes. The times I've been coming to the board, I can see where, well, this changed and that changed as far as the money's coming in. So I totally agree with that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hodis?
The way our government wants to regulate and fund public education is our biggest challenge. The public school systems are where most students receive their education. No other time in history of the United States has public education faced the challenges that it does today. Public school districts, all educators, are being made the whipping boy of the U.S. Congress and the state of Missouri General Assembly. These two government bodies, mandates are the real issue in public education with financing. Their mandate handicaps all public education with the rules, regulations, and funding issues that take away time from educating students. Forces all educators to be paper pushers, and forces every local taxpayer to fund a greater portion of public education. It's my belief that if these two government bodies would only establish guidelines, all educational institutions, for all educational institutions, and provide the funding that they are required to law, then the community will be able to determine how they educate our students. So the funding by our governments is really our big issue.
All right, well answered, candidates. Our next question comes from the audience, and I would like you guys to go into explaining to us the 5-year strategic plan. If you guys know anything about that. So if you guys know that a little bit, we're going to start with you, Mr. Seiger.
It's a pretty broad topic. I sat on the 5-year strategic committee and enjoyed my work on that as part of the technology committee and the collaboration. The 5-year strategic plan primarily focuses on our mission statements, preparing students today for success for tomorrow. and every student will graduate with a college and career readiness skills. So that was the core focus of our 5-year strategic plan. And I believe we've laid the groundwork to meet that.
Okay, thank you very much. Mrs. Hope?
Like Mr. Steiger said, it's a very broad subject because there's a lot in there. And like you said, that's what it focuses on, and it's kind of hard to get into details of the program. But it's very good, and it's been well thought out and well worked out with a variety of input from different people, and I think it's a good plan.
Thank you.
As everybody said, it's a huge subject, a 5-year strategic plan, but it's going to be based upon the budget, financing, the forecast that our CFO and the community sees for our district and what we have for expenditures, the facility needs for all of our students. The facility needs also include the technology needs. We do in our schools. So we have the technology available for all students. 21st century learning is one of the key factors. Where do we want our students to be in 5 years? Where will Francis Howell education system be in 5 years? Will we be the top in the St. Louis area, the top in St. Charles? Education is the big factor of the whole strategic plan. It leads everything to the point of educating students with the best ability, the best teachers we can hire and administrators, and be able to maintain the facilities and provide the facilities for education.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Johnson?
First of all, several boards ago, they had the foresight to establish a strategic plan. In its simplest form, the strategic plan is basically a map for the district to follow over the next 5 years. It encompasses academic achievement, fiscal goals, facility goals, and it could be just a project that administration would put together, stick in a binder, and not look at. But that's not the way it is utilized in this district. The goals in the strategic plan are driven down to each school. Those schools are to set academic goals, climate goals, behavior goals, and administration does an excellent job of monitoring those. But in its essence, it's a map that the administration has laid out where they want this district over the next 5 years and a plan on how to get there. It's also dynamic because as things occur, such as financing is not there, or academic standards change, such as the Common Core standards that are coming, it's adaptable, and it involves the changing of our curriculums, but it's strictly a map to tell the district and the public which direction the Francis Howell School District is going to take over the next 5 years.
All right, well answered. I want to talk about an issue that's been a hot topic at Board of Education meetings, not just this year, but last year and for quite a few years. And I think if you know that, you guys might know what I'm going to ask you is about. There's been a lot of talk from parents and a lot of chatter at board meetings about turf fields and athletic facilities and equal maintenance at different schools. So I want to ask you guys how you guys plan to keep funding for different various projects equal across the board for high schools and middle schools and elementary schools while maintaining academic edge. And we're going to start with yourself.
Oh boy. Well, one of our main focuses should be on student safety. And after coming to several of the meetings, I have noticed with the facilities, there are several of our buildings that are getting at the age where they're really going to be needing some repair. In particular, I know they've talked about Fairmount and Barnwell with the HVAC system and how expensive all of that is. I understand with turf fields, it makes it much safer for our athletes to be on turf fields. It's a very difficult decision to make, but I think we have to weigh everything out. What our most important needs are at the time, financial responsibility if we have the finances available to do that, and it's something that if we have the money and it's going to make it safer for our students, I'm in favor of the turf field. However, if we only have so much money and we have a building that's falling apart and needing repairs, then obviously that's going to have to take precedent over anything else. So I guess that would be, safety is my main issue for students, and with the facilities, we need to keep our kids safe.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Otis?
The turf field has been a hot topic in Francis South for quite a few years, not just in the last 6-8 months. We've been lucky on the last bond issue here in our district. Construction has been down throughout the St. Louis area, throughout the United States. With the construction being down, we have been able to finance projects we never thought we could. The first choice on our projects was student learning. What is required for student learning? Our classroom needs for them. The science labs at North. The addition at Daniel Boone. So turf field is not a question of if, it's the question of when we're going to have it. At present time, there's an agenda item on the next board meeting on April 5th, which 2 of us will be present at. And it's future bond projects, the remainder of the bond money. We are hoping at this time that we will know the cost of the HVAC systems at Fairmont and Barnwell, and if they come in like the rest of the estimates have in the cost, more than likely we will have money for turf fields. If not, we might have to wait just a little bit longer to see how the rest of the needs turn out. But it is when is the question that we have, and hopefully in April we will be able to determine that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Johnson?
It's interesting, 2 years ago, turf was a 4-letter word in this district. So we've come a long way, and I think that's because of what's going on in other schools in the area, and the fact that eventually over the next year or so, Francis South North and Francis South Central will be the only 2 schools in the St. Charles area without artificial turf. So I think that's something that needs to be considered. As Mr. Hoditz indicated, on April 5th, the facilities list is going to be coming forward for review by the board. Currently, artificial turf is, depending on if you take the item that was approved at the last board meeting off, it's either 5th or 6th on the list. There is enough bond money, we think, possibly to get that done this year. In at least a plan to have turf in those 2 schools, depending on the money for the air conditioning systems and some other infrastructure needs that Barnwell and a couple of the other schools have. But it is an extended safety issue. It would keep our schools on parity with other schools they compete against. I understand why the parents have become active about it over the last year or 2. It's something that needs to be addressed, and I'm sure the board will address it within the budgetary process, and I'm optimistic that it'll get accomplished.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Sider?
Well, I think going last on this question is a definite disadvantage. I think my fellow colleagues have covered it very well. I did speak up at several of the board meetings in favor of turf fields for Francis South North and Francis South Central. I understand and agree that the facilities committee, it is not #1 on the list. But as Mr. Hoditz said, we have been fortunate in the construction cost and the bond money, and it looks like there's going to be bond money left over. There are a few things, as Mr. Johnson said, 4 or 5, depending on how you look at the list. They're ahead of turf fields. But I'm in favor of turf fields because, for several reasons. #1, safety is a major concern. Parity with other schools in the county, as Mr. Johnson said. North and Central will be the only schools without turf fields at that point. And parity within the district. And I know that's a nasty word to say, but as a parent at North, I hear a lot of North parents and my friends talk about, why does Howell have a field? Why don't we have a field? And I try to explain to them the age and infrastructure, the buildings age and the facilities age at different times. But as a resident of the district, you would like to think that when you move into the Francis Howell School District, no matter what high school you go to, you're going to have similar facilities. And that's not true right now. Francis Howell North, I think, right now is one of the older buildings in the district. Not only does it need a turf field, its other athletic facilities need to be looked at, like its baseball fields. I'd be remiss if I didn't say the auditorium needs to be looked at. As a parent and a band booster and a supporter of the fine arts in our district, the auditorium at North is very small for the needs. So I would agree with all my fellow candidates, and I hope that answers the question.
That does. I want to touch on another issue that I think is something very important, especially going into this time where things are going to get pretty tough on the board. There's been a lot of tension between board members the past few months, especially as issues become more pertinent and ideological. I think we've come to see certain members of the board tighten up. So how will you guys as candidates work if you were elected to make sure that the board can compromise and work together and make decisions as a group and prevent the gridlock that can become detrimental to passing things, making the district work? And we'll start with you, Mr. Hodges.
Some of the tension between board members is created by the cliques that we have. Cliques are good, cliques are bad. Bad piece is, once we come before things, it appears that some decisions have been made ahead of time and discussed. And that upsets other board members. If we would all try to work as a team together, form our own independent opinions, we'd probably get along a lot better. And respect what each other knows and their knowledge, which seems we have lost some. So, in order to work together, I'd be willing to step forth and work with anybody, discuss the issues, but at the same time, I don't like to find surprises out that decisions been made before we come in here, or once we're here, by comments that are made. So that's what I see to relieve the tensions.
I think Mr. Hodges, Mr. Johnson, same question for you.
I think the key word in Mr. Hodges' comment was perception. At no time in the last 3 years that I've been on this board has a board member called me up and said, here's what we're going to do at the board meeting. We're going to vote in X, and you need to vote along with us. Has never happened to me in 3 years. I have never called a board member and said, hey, let's do X. So I don't have that perception whatsoever. I think that this is this current board is one of the most free-thinking boards that has existed in the past 5 years. Now, I've sat in that audience 4 and 5 years ago, and I've seen chaos up on this board. I've seen violations of the Sunshine Law. I've seen obvious times when decisions had been made before the board meeting ever started. I have not seen that in the 3 years since I've been on this board. So I think perception maybe is not reality in this case. There is the fact that certain board members get along with each other does not have anything to do with the way decisions are made. It's not the way I make decisions.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Sauer, same question.
I think this is an advantage where I haven't been on the board. And I will say that and I've been coming to board meetings, almost every board meeting for the last 2 years. And if you look at the vote totals, you'll see that probably 90% of the time, the board agrees. And I expect that that will continue. As a board member, I've told everybody that I've talked to and the groups that have endorsed me that regardless of your endorsement, I'm going to be an independent thinker, and I'm going to do what I think is in the best interests of the students. I don't know that there's factions on the board because, again, I haven't been part of that. But I know that going forward, I plan to respect my fellow board members and bring my own skills to the job and vote my own mind on issues as they arise.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Hope?
Like Mr. Johnson said, in the past I have seen some of the board meetings get pretty fierce, but I really believe this board works really well together. Sure, some of them have some disagreements, but I think it's healthy discussion to bring out certain facts that maybe others didn't think about. I've been trained in cooperative learning, and it's a way to help people get along, and that you hear everyone's view, and that you respect one another enough to say, I understand what you're saying, and I respect what you're saying, and this is what I think. And I think that's healthy. And like Mr. Sider said, I think the board has been really good at being together on a lot of issues, especially the important ones. So I don't see that as an issue in the future.
All right, we have one last question for you guys before we do closing remarks. And this one comes from our audience too, and it's fitting as a last question. What do you see as the biggest challenge that you will face as a board member in your term? Mr. Johnson, we're going to start with you.
Can I pass on this one, Ken? Well, I think the challenges we face as a board are communicating more transparently what we do in a micro sense. We have very good discussions, I think. We have different talents that come forward. And I think for the most part, as Mr. Sider pointed out, 90% of the time we operate on a fairly cohesive basis. On a macro basis, the challenges we face as a board, as we've talked about, are financial. And I think the other challenge over the next few years is preparing the patrons in the district for the upcoming curriculum changes that are going to be adopted in 2014 once the Common Core is implemented, because that's going to change the rigor of some of the classes. And I think we need to get buy-in from the parents. It's going to be a change. We're going to be stepping up the education of some of the elementary and middle schools, and especially the high schools. And we need to get buy-in from all of our patrons on this. And I think that's part of as we just touched upon earlier, the strategic plan. And it should be part of the communication process from the administration and from the board to keep the district informed on what we're doing, why we're doing it, what decisions are being made, what roadblocks or impediments we have in operating as a board or operating the school district, and getting feedback from everyone we possibly can. But bottom line is the 7 people that sit up here with the input from administration are the ones that have to make the decision. So we have to have a cooperative nature, and I think we're up to the challenge of doing that.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Sider.
Can you repeat the question for me, please?
Yeah, here, she'll repeat the question for you.
What do you see as the biggest challenge you will face as a board member?
I think we addressed that earlier when we talked about the financial challenges, so I won't readdress that. I agree with what Mr. Johnson said, but I think communicating to our patrons and making sure that they understand the issues in education is very important, whether it be the financial changes to the curriculum. In general, we have great parents in our district, and we have a good level of parent involvement. I I think we need to get more parent involvement in our school district and bring more people on to our committees, open our committees up. They're open now, but make sure the public understands they can get on our committees and can actually help shape the direction of the district.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Hope?
You're talking about challenge for me, right?
Yeah, what do you think your biggest challenge that you'll face as well will be in return?
Okay, so I agree with them communicating. It's really important to me to communicate. I'm in touch with a lot of the teachers and the staff in the district. I know, teachers in all the buildings. I lived here a long time, so I know a lot of the people in the district, a lot of patrons. And I think it's important for me to be able to go out and speak with them on a more regular basis and get their input, get them involved, help with communication, and just to let them know what's going on at the board meetings and in our district, and just inform them. There's a lot of people, when I talk to them, they're not aware of some of the things that are going on. Even though we have an excellent webpage, people don't always have time to look at that. So I think for me, I really want to get out there and reach people in communication.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hodis?
Outside of the financial situation, the biggest challenge that I see for me as a board member is the distrust of the patrons, because they do not understand all the rules and regulations that school districts must be on. The quality of education, by the distrust, they're always trying to compare public school systems, private and parochial schools. The difference is we educate all students no matter what their abilities are. And once when you start comparing the different types of schools where you have select students to public students, I would take our top students within the Francis House School District and compare them to them, and our education would be equal to them. But the distrust is the way the news puts it out to the people, the patrons, that public education is going down. But they don't give the qualifications for their state. People think that we have bond issue money to build buildings, to add anything, turf fields. No, that once when it's approved, we could take it and just put it in teacher's salary or something else, some other place. But the law tells us we cannot do this. So the people have a perceived idea that we're wasting a lot of money once when things were approved and we're laying off somebody because we're putting in a turf field. This is the type of distrust that I see as a board that we really have to work on to our community to educate them what is really required and what the law says we can do.
All right, thank you for your response. So we're going to go ahead and start on your guys' closing remarks, and definitely the patrons with and people watching at home. You guys have about 2 minutes to read these. It's kind of like your introductions, and we're going to start with you, Ms. Hope, and work our way back to Mr. Hodis. We're going to go in reverse order with the conclusions, okay? So you start us off, and you'll finish us off, Mr. Hodis, okay? So, Ms. Hope, if you want to go ahead.
Well, I'd just like to say I'm not a politician, and I'm not a real eloquent teacher or speaker. When I get in front of people, I get very nervous, as you can probably tell. But I know this district, and I know it well, and I do my research, and I do my reading, and I have lived it as a teacher. And I know what goes on in the classroom, because I've been there. And I know how the teachers feel, because I still talk to them. And I know how the students feel, because I still talk to them. I think I would make a very good person to be on the board because of that insight that I have had, and that I've been here all my life. I will research each and every issue. I read through the curriculum. I've been on several curriculum committees, so I understand curriculum. I've even written curriculum. In that respect, I think I would be very good. Finances, I've done a lot of budgeting in the district, so I understand all of that. And I just want you to understand that I love this district. I feel like it's part of my family because I've had relatives who have worked in the district and who have been on the school board. And it's just, I'm very passionate about it, and I will never let that go. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Sider?
In part of my closing comments, I'd like to readdress the challenges. I think all the board candidates have talked about the financial challenges for the school district, but nobody has yet to mention the financial challenges on families within our district. And throughout the recession, we've seen a growth in the number of students who are that now qualify for free and reduced lunch. And we know that there is an economic strain on our community. And we know that kids who come to school hungry or without clothing have special needs that we need to address. So I don't want to forget that as a challenge. As I mentioned earlier in my opening statement, I am passionate about public education. I've been involved in the Technology Committee, Curriculum Advisory Committee, Finance Committee, Strategic Planning Committee. I'm the Secretary-Treasurer of, the Secretary of the Francis Howell North Band Boosters and Webmaster. I'm just what you might call a helicopter parent. I've been involved with my kids' education throughout their tenure. And I know how important education is. And I'll bring that passion to the school board. And again, we'll think independently and do what's best in the best interest of students all the time. I may not agree all the time with, if elected, with the rest of the board. But I will be respectful of the board, the administration, the staff, and the patrons of the district. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sider. Mr. Johnson, you want to go ahead?
As has been discussed tonight, public education is under assault by those who tend to generalize education outcomes rather than focusing on accomplishments made by successful districts. The Francis Howell School District is one of the best in the state of Missouri. Maintaining its current academic level will require greater input and cooperation on the local level in the future. Francis Howell accepts all students, making accommodations for students with different cultures, different languages, and a multitude of handicaps that not all students face. I believe that all students benefit from these opportunities and can see some measure of success. The district's on a positive path of academic achievement, even as our financial future looks murky. The district has great leadership in place, a quality environment for learning, and the most highly qualified staff of teachers in the state of Missouri. We are poised to continue success and are well prepared for the future of education, however that template is provided to us. I look forward to the opportunity to continue serving the Francis Howell community. The last 3 years have brought change to this board. Decisions are being made in a cooperative manner. We've attempted to bring civility to the process, sometimes successfully. While accused of being elitist, we have remained firm in our conviction of doing the right things to advance student learning. We've been told that we are not the Board of Taxpayer Protection, we're the Board of Education. I strongly disagree with that comment, as we're charged with both fiscal and educational outcomes for the district, lest we stray down the path of past boards. Patrons now have the opportunity to determine the future direction of the Francis Howell School District. I need your help to continue the success we currently enjoy. I believe we're on the right path. I request your vote on April 3rd. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Hoders, we'll finish with you.
Public education is the greatest thing of the United States. One of the few countries that have every student or every child guaranteed public education. The reason I'm running for school board, and I want to stay here again, is to ensure that the main purpose of the Francis Howell School District is educating every student, no matter what their needs. To continue with sound financial management, to balance students' and taxpayers' needs, to provide quality educators and staff members who meet the needs of all of our students, to improve the relationship between the administration, Board of Education, the teachers, the support staff, and the patrons of the district, to help ensure that administrators are the educational leaders, not only of Francis Howell, but of the state of Missouri. And these educational leaders' main objective is to put student learning first. Next week, taxpayers, the patrons, the voters are going to have a choice of who they want to represent the district. I hope you vote for me because my major goal is student learning. We need to get back to that and have the support of the community to do it. It's been a challenge for every one of us, this election, to try to get our information out. And I want to thank the FHEA teachers for endorsing me as one of their 2 candidates for the Board of Education. This endorsement also includes the support staff and the maintenance, grounds, and custodians of our district. Over the past 6 years, they've understood what I stood for. And I hope to be able to continue it for 3 more years.
All right, well, thank you, candidates, for answering our questions. You guys did a great job, and we want to thank you guys who came here today, and thanks to you guys who watched at home. That's going to conclude our Meet the Candidates next night, guys, so we'll see you again this time next year for another one of these things. But on April 3rd, go to the polls and vote for one of these guys. All right? Okay. Well, vote.